This next speaker, I have to tell you, I'm super excited about. He came to Las Vegas, which is where I live, and spoke at a session where we, as a community in Las Vegas, were bringing together the business leaders and the teachers, the principals, and the leaders of our schools to talk about education is no longer just about education. We need leaders in those schools who have the ability to be nimble and make decisions and run those schools like businesses. So they brought Jaime in to talk about how education is evolving and changing, and they set up, Vegas has actually set up a mentoring program of principals of individual schools are paired up with CEOs of companies in Las Vegas, so they can really build that. When they get your training to be a principal, that's not business training. It's about education. So it's a very successful program. It's extremely exciting. And so Jaime was there, and I sat through this presentation with my mouth just open going, oh my gosh, we could insert MLS into so many of these things. I've got to have this guy at our conference. So I totally fangirled, ran and chased him down after his presentation. I'm like, Jaime, you got to come speak at CMLS 2017. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, it'll be great. He's like, sure, just find me on LinkedIn or somewhere. He's like, just. So I hunted him down. Kelly was very helpful in that. And now I am so pleased to introduce you, Jaime Casap, Google's Chief Education Evangelist. I had to practice that. It's his title, coolest title. And he is here today to talk to you about navigating a new era and the parallels between education and the change that it's going through and how that applies to us in MLS. So please help me welcome Jaime Casap. Thank you, Jaime.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. So I'm really excited to be here. Austin's a great city. I'm based in Phoenix, Arizona, and I think this is an important topic, and I appreciate the team inviting me. What I want to talk about is education, but I want to talk about it so it makes sense to you guys in terms of what you guys are facing and your future, either customers or your future employees or the people that you will be partnering with, to think about what this generation is. So I want to start with some contact information. I'm the Chief Education Evangelist at Google. I've been at Google for 12 years. And given the fact that it's an 18-year-old company, that's a long time to be at a company. This is a picture of me and the CIO at ASU when we launched Google Apps for Education into the university space. We launched Google Apps into K-12. We launched Chromebooks into education. And today we have more than 70 million users using our tools in education around the world, and we have Chromebooks in the majority of countries around the world. And so before my time at Google, I spent another 7 years working as a consultant at Accenture, focused on organizational development, focused on what's happening in the space of cultures and how we can improve how we run our businesses. So I have a lot of experience when it comes to how companies need to prepare for the future. But I want to start with talking about the importance of education and what it means to all of us. No matter where I go, no matter where I travel to, education it becomes a topic. People are passionate about education. People care about education. For me, it's a personal passion, because if it wasn't for education, I wouldn't be standing in front of you. I am a first-generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York. Any New Yorkers in the room? You're usually louder than that. There you go. That's better. But I'm not talking about the Hell's Kitchen that my daughter lives in today. I'm talking about the one from the 70s and 80s that was not a nice place to grow up. Very violent place, a lot of crime, a lot of bad things were happening in New York City back in the 70s and 80s, and I wanted out of that community. And the only way to get out of a community like that was to focus on my education. So I went to high school, I graduated from high school, I went to college, graduated from college, went to graduate school, and I get to stand in front of you and do this because of education. And that's the importance that education has, the impact that we have on students around the world. Now, in America, we have that ethos that if you work hard, you get your education, you can have the American dream, you can do anything. And I've had some amazing milestone moments in my life because of education. I had one of those moments 2 years ago when the First Lady of the United States, at the time it was Michelle Obama, asked me to come to the White House to speak to about 200 kids about the importance of education, about the importance of not just graduating from high school, but thinking about college and what they're going to do with their future. It was part of her Reach Higher initiative. And I said, let me check my calendar. No, you don't. You know, I wish I was cool enough to be like, yeah, let's see. Can you change that date for me? No, I said yes. I will be there. And when you show up at the White House and you walk into the east wing of the White House, the world changes for you. You feel like you're walking into 1880. The pressure is amazing. The culture, the history, everything that you see there is amazing. And what it looks like when you speak, it looks like this. And doesn't this look like one of those pictures you get at the state fair? Where they blue screen you in or green screen you into the background. And you know, when I showed this picture to my friends, they were not impressed that I spoke at the White House. They're your friends. They're not supposed to be impressed. They were impressed that I owned a suit. That's what they were. It's one suit. I have one suit. That's it. And you know, this is the point though. You take a kid from Hell's Kitchen, New York, and you can put them in the East Room of the White House to speak to 200 students in front of the President and First Lady. That's what we all strive for when it comes to the American dream. But here's the thing we have to realize is that the impact that we have in education goes on for generations and generations. Because now I have my own kids, and this is them. I have a 24-year-old. Oh, actually, she just turned 25 yesterday. It's going to take me a while to get used to it. She's a 25-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 3-year-old. That's right. I can only handle one child at a time. I like it that way. Don't judge. And my 25-year-old is living in Hell's Kitchen, New York, working at CNN, living her dream, doing exactly what she wanted to do with her life, and graduated from college almost 3 years ago, and we never talked about college. It was never a conversation. We didn't have a discussion about whether she's going to go to college or not. She just assumed she was going to college because I went to college, and her mother went to college, and people in her life went to college. She actually assumed she was going to graduate school because her mother went to graduate school and I went to graduate school. She assumed I was going to pay for it, but we took care of that problem pretty quickly. And my 16-year-old isn't debating whether he's going to go to college. He's talking about what his higher education experience will be like. That's the impact that we have with education, it goes on for generations and generations and generations. Now, what I want to talk about is how things are changing in education and how that impacts what you guys do on a daily basis. And a lot of it has to do with the role that technology is playing in education. But I always like to start off with this idea that technology in education isn't new. Just like technology in everything that we do isn't new. Back in 1956, you could rent this hard drive from a company, and you couldn't buy it because it wasn't affordable, but you could lease it for $3,800 a month, and it was a 5 megabyte hard drive. Think about how much technology has changed over time, and at the same time, you have to also realize that what's old is new again. That it keeps coming back around at us. That every time we think about technology as something that's new, we have to realize that we've been working on this for a long time. And the same is true in education. We've been talking about technology in education forever. Motion pictures were going to revolutionize education in the 1900s. Television was going to revolutionize education in the 1950s. And we've been talking about computers in education since at least the 70s. I took a computer class when I was in 9th grade. I was told that computers were going to be important to my future. And I took a programming class. And some of the old people like me in the room will remember this. I learned how to program in BASIC. I wrote like 5,000 lines of code to make it took me like 9 months, to make a bird fly across the screen on a Commodore 64. You guys remember that? It didn't even look like a bird. It was just a squiggly line that just went back and forth. So why is it different this time? What's happening in the world that makes the talk about technology in education different and the technology in everything different? Well, there's a couple of things that are going on. First, over the last 100 years, we've been able to collect some amazing information about what good learning looks like. What good learning was to you guys when you were in school is not what good learning looks like today. We have some amazing research that shows us what learning should look like, how it needs to be engaging and relevant, how it needs to be personal, how it has to be at a pace that you can understand that it's not the same model that worked for you when you were in school. We know what works. We didn't know that those things worked 100 years ago. We now know. So you're starting to see the use of technology to create relevance, to create an opportunity to personalize what the experience would be like. And you're starting to see this if you have kids in school, and schools all over the world. That's first. Second, unlike when we took that computer class to learn how to program in BASIC, when technology wasn't around us at all, technology's wrapped itself around the core of everything that we do today, and we don't even recognize it anymore. For example, how many of you have not used technology today? How many of you have not used the web today? Right? Most of us are on our devices while we still have little crusties in our eyeballs when we wake up in the morning. Most of us have a mathematical formula that we don't even think about that's in our head. Where, how long have you driven before you realize you forgot your phone at home and you have to turn around and get it? Like, you know, that mathematical formula that we have in our heads about what we're going to do to turn around and get our phones. We have gotten to the point where technology's wrapped itself around the core of our lives. And it didn't take us that long to get here. I mean, think about the fact that we just saw Apple announce their new phone. The iPhone is 10 years old. Google just celebrated the 9th anniversary of the Chrome browser. Do you remember when we used to have to call the internet with our home phones and the internet was busy? And here's the thing, you were okay with that. You're like, I tried to call the internet today, it was busy. And the person you were talking to was like, well, did you try another number? You had a list of numbers you can call the internet with. And today, what's your expectation with technology? Even myself, I think about this stuff all day. If I get frustrated because I can't work at the speed I want to work at while I'm traveling through space at 535 miles an hour and 40,000 feet. And if we're the generation that was minding our own business when this thing called the internet showed up, what does that mean for a generation of kids who don't know any better? A generation of kids who don't know what the world looked like before Google. A generation of kids who don't know what the world looked like before smartphones and tablets and laptops. A generation of kids who don't know that the world used to exist without Wi-Fi. Go tell a 10-year-old kid that you're going to stay at a place that doesn't have Wi-Fi, and they're going to be shocked. They're like, what? Are we staying in a cave? Where are we going that doesn't have Wi-Fi? They have no concept of that. And this impacts everything. First of all, how they learn is different than how we learned. I'm not saying they're different than we are. We have to be careful and not say that this generation is born with technology, therefore they just naturally know how to use technology. No, that's not true at all. As a matter of fact, some of the data shows us they don't know how to use technology just as poorly, or they use technology just as poorly as we do. But how they think about learning is different than the way we think about learning. This is a picture of my 6-year-old when he was like 13, running into my office, and he had on that screen that you can't see is a bunch of code. He wasn't showing off that he could code. He had a bug. He wanted me to help him with his bug. Couldn't solve it. I had no idea he was learning how to code. Think about this. I work at Google, and he didn't ask me where he should learn how to code. He just started learning how to code. This generation thinks about learning in a different way. We waited for someone to teach us. If we wanted to learn something, in our heads, we said, who can teach me that? What class can I take? What's available for me? This generation just starts learning. They have the world at their fingertips, and not in the sense, the same way that we have the world at our fingertips. They have the world at their fingertips in an expectation that that's the way the world works. And that changes everything. Because when we think about this generation, and we say this about lots of generations, but this generation is different because they're the first true digital generation. On top of that, they're experiencing a world that we didn't experience. We have to sometimes reflect on that and ask ourselves, how does that impact what we do? For example, this is the Great Recession generation. Those that are, Generation Z is defined as those that are between the ages of 16 and 5. And if you think about my 16-year-old, he's seen nothing but a Great Recession for the entire time that he's been alive. That's all we've talked about. Great Recession, economy, bad, no jobs. That's all he's heard. He has experienced, with his generation, if you think about his generation, we grew up with this idea that if you work hard, and you're loyal, and you're dedicated, and you show up to work early and leave late, you can advance in your company. You can go from manager to director to SVP to president. Like you just have to put your time in. This generation watched their parents not be able to do that. They watched their parents be dedicated and loyal and then lose their jobs. They watched their siblings go to college with the expectation that they would get jobs at the end of that, and then they came back and didn't have jobs, and they were living in a basement. They witnessed this. And why that matters is because how they think about work is different. They know that 70% of Americans are disengaged with their work. So what they care about is control. It's no wonder that 70% of them don't want to work for companies at all. They want to do their own thing. They want control of their future. And they also don't, if they end up working for a company, they want meaningful work. 70% of them want to have a meaningful job. They don't want to just have a job to advance. They're looking for a different experience. At the same time that this is the Great Recession generation, I also consider this the 9/11 generation. We just celebrated, or not celebrated, but we just recognized 9/11 a couple days ago, 16 years ago. So think about a 16-year-old who doesn't know what the world looked like before 9/11, who doesn't know what the world looked like before the threats of global terrorism, domestic terrorism, violence, gun violence in schools. We just had a shooting in another school yesterday. Gun violence in movie theaters, airports. Remember when we used to go to airports, it was fun? This generation doesn't see airports as fun places to go. No wonder they want to stay inside on their computers all day. This generation is worried about things that we didn't have to worry about when we were kids. They recognize, 75% of them believe climate change is caused by humans. And here we are having debates about whether climate change is real or not. They're losing their minds. They don't understand. More than 60% of them don't understand why it's not the #1 priority for all of us. And so they're going to be growing up in a completely different world than we do. Now, they also believe that education is important. They want an education. They understand that they need an education, but they also recognize that it needs to change. That providing education the way we got education is not going to work for them. For example, most of us who went to college and graduated, it didn't matter what we majored in, right? We knew we'd be on the other side of it. How many people you know, or you yourself, have a degree in a field that has nothing to do with what you did in your life? Because for us, we just had to go to college. We just had to graduate and we'd be okay on the other side. This generation, because of the world we've built for them, doesn't see that. So they want to see outcomes. They want to see what they're going to do with their life tied into their degree. They don't want all the perks that colleges are talking to students about. Like, we have the best dorms, we have the best student center, we have the best rec center. They don't care about that stuff. They want to see classes, courses, resources, and how that ties to the outcomes of what they're going to do with their life. And on top of that, they really care about experiences. When we went to college, we did college, we lived in the dorms for the first 2 years. We did our thing, and then maybe we did an internship with a local company in our senior year for a couple months. This generation wants to have those experiences early on. They want to see that experience work for them as soon as they start higher education and even beforehand. And again, 70% of them want to work for themselves, so they want the experience of college to change for them. They want to see entrepreneurial classes. They want to see business classes, finance classes, no matter what they major in. Their expectations of what is available to them is different because they have the world at their fingertips. Now, what we need to think about and how this impacts you is, what is this generation facing? What's in front of them? What are they looking at from their perspective? And first, we have to recognize that the job of education for a long time was to do two things. One, prepare good, educated citizens, and two, prepare them for the economy. And the first thing we need to realize is that we don't live in this world anymore. This world that we're preparing kids for doesn't exist. Now, the education systems that we used in this country worked really well for a very long time, preparing kids for these types of jobs, but we no longer live in this world any longer. So what we need to do is think about what is happening in the economy and how this generation is going to respond to it. For example, we have these debates about bringing American jobs back. But we all know that those jobs aren't coming back. As a matter of fact, only 15% of jobs have been lost to trade. The rest have been lost to automation. And that's only going to get stronger. This picture here, if you ever go visit an Amazon warehouse, you'll see a 6 football field space with 6 people that work in it. The rest of them are these little orange robots. And even if you can find jobs that you think people can do, there's a good chance that those people will look like this, where robotics is taking over a lot of roles, a lot of tasks. We also have to recognize that all our jobs are impacted by technology. Not all jobs will be replaced by technology, but all our jobs will be impacted by technology in one way or another. And we're at the very beginning of what robotics is going to be able to do for us. And even if this generation can find jobs that typically humans do, there's a good chance that those jobs are going to be done by some kind of artificial intelligence or machine. 4.5 million Americans in this country make a living driving something. Driving supplies, driving people, the person who drove me from the airport here. What's going to happen in 10 years when self-driving cars become standard? You can buy a self-driving car today. I don't know if anyone's experienced this, but you see pictures of people driving on the highway and they drive by a Tesla, and the guy in the driver's seat is like reading the newspaper because the Tesla can drive itself today. So what's this going to look like in 10 years when you have self-driving mechanisms? In your space, in the retail space, in the real estate space, what's going to happen when I can make all my appointments and I'll have a self-driving car drive me to those appointments if I haven't drive to those appointments at all? That has a huge impact on lots of industries. Think about banking, for example. This is not new, by the way. Think about banking. How many of you go into a bank to get cash from a bank teller? If you get cash at all. That was the role of the bank teller. But here's the thing. Bank teller jobs haven't necessarily disappeared. As a matter of fact, there are more bank tellers working in banks today than there were when ATMs were introduced in banks in the 1990s. But their role has changed. What they do in those banks have changed. They are no longer processing cash. They're no longer taking your sheets and then handing you $20 bills. Their role has changed. And when we think about all our roles in business, we have to ask ourselves, how is our role going to change? Think about supermarkets, for example. For the most part, supermarkets are still run the same way they were when we were kids. You go into a Walmart, you go into a Kroger's, you go into a Safeway, any kind of grocery store, and you'll find anywhere between 4 and 8 or 10 cashiers processing things. They're taking the stuff that you put in your basket, scanning it, and putting it in a bag for you. Process work. And you're already starting to see self-checkouts at grocery stores. And you're starting to see companies like Amazon completely eradicate the idea of self-checkouts when you can just go into one of their stores and put stuff in your bag and then just walk out of the store with no checkout at all. Does that mean that there won't be any more cashiers at supermarkets? Probably, but it doesn't mean that there won't be any more people working in those supermarkets. As a matter of fact, what they're going to be doing is providing higher value service than just processing cans and your bank card. For example, can you imagine going into a supermarket and take the 8 cashiers, and now they're not cashiers, they're food experts. And now they're in the aisles hanging out. So when you're walking through an aisle and you're looking for some special rice that your wife sent you for that you can't find, that's a personal problem. Or, what's the difference between, a cucumber and asparagus? I have no idea. There's someone there that can help you. Or can ask you, what are you cooking? Oh, let me show you these ingredients. Let me give you this. Let me provide additional services for you. Let me give you higher service. Let me give you a better experience shopping in a supermarket, instead of you just being lost in a giant supermarket. Doesn't mean there'll be less people, it just means the roles are changing. And this is across everything. It doesn't matter if you are a professional or whether you are someone with a high school degree. Technology is impacting all jobs. This is a picture here, it's hard to see, but all the blue is like high professional jobs, the orange are college jobs, and the red are high school diploma jobs. And you can see the impact that technology has across the board, or automation has across the board. All our roles are going to be impacted. But here's the thing, this has been happening for a long time. The first time a farmer used a tractor, he used technology. The first time you walked into an office and used a laptop or a computer to do processing work, you're using technology, automation. Our processes are being tasked. It's predicted that in the next 20 years, about 50% of jobs will be impacted greatly by automation or technology to some degree, meaning that our roles will change, no matter what it is that we do. So given all this, given the future that they face, given who they are and how they see the world, there are some expectations that this generation has that you need to think about as you think about what your future looks like. For example, it has to be digital. I don't actually believe this number, but 100% of Generation Z is online every day. I gotta think that there's one kid who lost his phone somewhere. But 100% of kids are on the internet every single day. 50% of them are online 10 hours a day. So as they become your future customers, as they become your future customers' customers, as they become your future employees, what does that mean to how you work? Also, you have to understand that because they're the first true digital generation, they're processing information at a different speed. There are 3.8 million Google searches every minute. There are 1.8 million snaps on Snapchat every minute. There are 46,000 pictures uploaded on Instagram every single minute. Information is coming at them at such a rapid pace. Second is, pictures are great, but videos are worth more. 93% of Generation Z spends at least an hour a week on YouTube. And half of them spend a couple hours a week on YouTube. And those of us who have teenagers, we know that this is true. Now think about this. 400 hours of video gets uploaded on YouTube every single minute. If you're producing a 4-minute video, How long do you think your Generation Z person is going to be watching that video for? With an 8-second attention span. Again, because this generation is facing different problems than we face and looking at the future from a different perspective, how we approach them has changed. For example, when we were kids, people would ask us, what do you want to be when you grow up? Remember that question? We still ask kids that question today. I'm sure some of you are guilty of asking that question of kids today. What do you want to be when you grow up? Well, that question used to make sense when we were kids, when there were like 20 jobs. There were general categories of jobs. You could be a firefighter, you could be a real estate agent, you could be a police officer, an astronaut. We had general categories. Well, 60% of the jobs of the future don't exist today. As a matter of fact, I'm working in a job and in a company that didn't exist 20 years ago. And so that question doesn't make sense to them anymore. So what we should be asking kids, and by the way, this also works for adults, is what problem do you want to solve? What problem spins in your head? Because the more important question is, what do you need to learn to solve that problem? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to have to solve that problem? How can you start building those knowledge, skills, and abilities? Where can you get that information? Who's solving this problem today? They have the world at their fingertips, and they're going to be taking advantage of it. This is a picture of one of our Google Science Fair winners, and she won the grand prize, and what she did was she had a problem that she wanted to solve. She wanted to do cancer diagnostics more effectively. You know, that's what most 17-year-olds think about. And she literally picked up a How to Code 101 textbook and taught herself how to code and built a program to do cancer diagnostics better using the cloud. And her Cloud for Cancer has won awards, and she's been named one of Time Magazine's 30 Under 30. She's influential and is doing cancer diagnostics in a different way. And she was 17 years old when she started this. They are a problem-solving generation who's not looking to advance in the company. They're looking to solve the problems that we've been talking to them about for the last 15 years. The other thing that worked for us that doesn't work for this generation is influence. We were influenced by brands. We were influenced by Nike and Adidas and General Mills. This generation is influenced by people. If you don't recognize this person, that means you're old. This is Shawn Mendes, who has 14 million people following him on Twitter, 24 million people following him on Instagram, and I don't know how many he's got on Snapchat. I don't have Snapchat. But what he says matters. What he thinks about matters. And this is a kid who started his career by producing 10-second Vine videos. And now he's one of the most powerful people in America. And if he's using Adidas, or if he's using a brand, if he's using something, kids respond to that. So they're influenced by people, by their peers, by people who they can relate to. Another thing that impacts what you do for a living is this idea that this generation wants to drive the design of everything, because that's what they're used to doing. My 16-year-old kid can't imagine why I go to a sneaker store to buy sneakers. It's like, why do you go to a sneaker store? Like, what if they don't have your size? What if they don't have the color you're looking for? He orders his online. Like they do everything. I took this picture in Chicago because it reminded me of the fact that this is the world that we live in. You can see by the sign there that you can customize this shoe. Why are you even in the shoe store? The shoe store becomes a demo station. And so what does this all mean for this generation? Well, there's a couple of things that you need to pay attention to. And the first, the most important one to what you do for a living is that information no longer matters. Information is a commodity. Information has no value. It's what you do with that information that matters. It's how do we convert information into intelligence that we can use. In education, I'll give you the education example. I saw a couple months ago that 7% of Americans can name the first 4 presidents of the United States. And that's supposed to be a bad article about how bad American history is in schools. Ooh, the vibe in the room just changed. Because I have the microphone and I can point to one of you and ask you to name me who the first 4 presidents are. And if you don't know, you're going to be embarrassed. And other people are going to make fun of you for the rest of the conference because you didn't know. Even though they didn't know, they just didn't get called on. Or I can give all of you 30 seconds and all of you can tell me who the first 4 presidents are. Information as a commodity has no value. It's what we do with that information. So ask yourselves, how are you using information to create intelligence? And not just processed information that anyone can get. What this generation is looking for is intelligence. What can I do with this information? How do you convert this information into something that I can use? So I ask you to think about, with all the information you collect, what's information and what is intelligence? And how do you focus more on intelligence and less on just information? 2 is this idea that mobile is everything. This generation has their phone stuck to their hands. Making sure that you can process all that information into intelligence in a little tiny screen is absolutely relevant. This generation isn't about tablets. They're not even really about laptops. They're about their mobile devices and what they can do with these devices. And we're just starting to get into the realm of artificial intelligence and augmented reality and the things that we can do in this space. Number 3 is a recognition that technology will continue to advance and you can't do anything about it. I bought a house 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, 18 months ago. And 18 months ago, my technology was, I had to call my real estate agent, say, we're looking for this kind of house, and then he would pick up some listings, and then I would go and visit those places with my wife and schedule time and do all the things that we currently do today to some degree. In just 18 months, I can now put on a pair of glasses and visit all those houses just as well. In 18 months. The other thing to pay attention to is that the economy is shifting. But here's the thing, as I said earlier, what's old is new again. This isn't new. This is actually how we started. We didn't have money at the beginning. I had bread and you had tomatoes. And I said, I'll give you some of my bread if you give me some of your tomatoes. And that's how we did things. We're back in that space again. What does that mean to your world when we live in a shared economy? What does that mean for a generation of kids who are growing up like this? What does it mean when our kids who are working for themselves now don't have jobs but are still making money, don't own things but still want to rent things and still want to have partnerships and things? We have to pay attention to what's happening in the space, and if anything illustrates the impact that you can have very quickly, it's Uber. And look at the impact that Uber had on taxis in just like 2 years. So we have to make sure that we understand that the economy has changed forever, and that we have to recognize that this generation looks at the things that we cared about, right? The American dream was get your education, get your college degree, and then live the American dream, which was advance through life, move up levels in your company, work for your company for 20, 30 years, buy an American house, that was the American dream, buy a bigger house, and then buy a really big house. And that doesn't work with this generation. What happens to this industry when all of a sudden you have a generation of kids like my daughter or my 16-year-old who doesn't want to own a house? Think about this, I scratched my head with this one. My 16-year-old when it was time to get his license to drive a car that we had an extra car because my daughter had a car sitting in the driveway. He's like, I don't need a license. What do you mean? Like, what do I need a license for? I don't need a car. I'll just have Uber drive me around. This generation thinks about the economy in a different perspective. But the good news is that what you do add value, what the real estate market does add in value, is influence and relationships. They care about influence, they care about relationships, they care about face-to-face interactions. They don't want you to process information, they want you to influence. They want to understand what you are an expert in, what knowledge you bring to the table. How are you bringing them, not information, but intelligence that they can use? And how do you find influential people in the community to help you do that? So what I think we need more than anything in education or in any business is this idea of a culture shift. That we no longer can predict the future. That what we need to be able to do is constantly iterate and innovate. That there is no future marketplace. That there is nothing that 20 years from now what something's going to look like. That the future starts on Monday, and then Tuesday, and then Wednesday. I'll give you a couple of examples of what this looks like. In education, we need to move from what we currently see in terms of what education looks like to what it should look like, which is a model where kids are making things and building things and doing things, and we're starting to see this experiment in education that you're seeing across the globe around maker movements, around inquiry-based learning, around collaborative learning models where kids are working together and they're driving their learning, where they're doing things and making things, they're experiencing things. They're just not sitting in a room gathering information that they have access to. I'll give you a Google example. This is what Google looked like when it started. This is it. This is Larry and Sergey putting a couple of machines together and doing computing from a different perspective, doing search from a different perspective, doing distributive computing from a different perspective. So this is what it looked like, and this is what Google looks like today. This is one row of the gazillions of rows of servers that we have in data centers all over the world, and there's three things I want to point out. Number one is that this, going back a slide, this can happen anywhere. You don't need to be in Northern California to do this. That any kid, any 2 or 3 kids can grab some machines together with the cloud and with the technology that they have and start anything that they want. But it also means that this can happen in China and in India and in other parts of the world. That you don't need to be in Northern California anymore to do this. So that's one. Two is that this is not what Google looked like on Monday, and then this is what it looked like on Thursday. This took 18 years of iteration, innovation, creativity, all the things that we need in all business worlds. Every single industry is impacted by the cloud. Every industry is impacted by technology. It took 18 years to move us to this point. And the third thing to point out is that this is not what a data center will look like 18 years from today. There is no future data center. There's just the next wire, the next light bulb, the next casing, the next software update, the next hardware update, and so on. So ask yourselves, what does innovation and iteration look like in your industry? How do you constantly move forward? To kind of close out here, I want to put up this picture of my 3-year-old, who's Spider-Man, I think, at the time in this picture. That's what she wants to be when she grows up, by the way. She wants to be Spider-Man. A couple of months ago, we got one of those Google Homes. Some of you might have one, or you might have an Alexa or one of those devices, those personal assistants. Got one in the mail, set it up in the living room, connected to the internet, and my wife and I start playing with it. Okay, Google, what time is it? Okay, Google, what's the weather outside? Okay, Google, play us a song or tell us a joke. And we're messing with this thing. My daughter's not involved in any of this. She's just watching. She finds a pause and walks between us, stares at this thing, and says, okay, Google, play the Spider-Man song. Nothing. It doesn't recognize her voice yet. It can't pick, these devices can't pick up kids' voices yet, thank God. She tries again. Okay, Google, play the Spider-Man song. Nothing. She looks up at me, she goes, Papi, Google's broken. She's figured out how to use this thing in 1 minute. What happens when it's not broken? What happens when she can ask this thing, why is the sun yellow? Why is it hot? And this thing can recognize that she's 3 years old and can give her a 3-year-old answer, or a 6-year-old answer, or a 10-year-old answer. Or better yet, can ask her questions to help drive her curiosity. What happens when she grows up and she says, okay, Google, find me a house. This is what I know about you, and this is the kind of house that would be good for you. This is where those houses are. So as I close out, and you think about the future, and you think about what's happening in this space, I want you to think about a 5-year-old, or my daughter who's 3. Think about a little kid and how they see the future. And then I want you to think about whatever the latest and greatest technology is that you have, whether it's an iPhone or iPhone XX, I don't know what they're called anymore, the new one that's coming out. Many of you are going to order one of those, or your MacBook, your Chromebook, your Surface tablet, whatever technology it is that you have. For me, I have the Google Pixel. Usually not a lot of people have this phone, but this is the latest and greatest technology from the most innovative company in the world. I'm kidding. But I want you to think about this latest and greatest technology from the most innovative company in the world, and that 5-year-old, and then realize that this is the worst technology that 5-year-old will ever see in their life. This is their Commodore 64. In 20 years, they're going to find this in a 50-cent box at a thrift store. We're going to have thousands of them sitting in boxes in thrift stores. And she's going to say to her friends, oh, I have to buy this. My dad had one of these. Because she's going to want to bring home to put on her shelf like a museum piece, the way some of you might have old technology sitting on your shelf like museum pieces. And she's going to remember, because you're 5 years old and you remember things from when you're 5. She's like, she's going to say to her younger friends and siblings, look, you guys, that's the port. And her friend's like, what is that for? And he's like, you're not going to believe this, but I'm telling you, this is true. My dad had to plug this into the wall. And her friend's going to be like, wait, what do you mean? He took it out of the box, plugged it into the wall once, and then never had to plug it? No, every day, for hours, this thing was plugged into the wall. Those are the 5-year-olds who are starting in school this fall. Those are the 5-year-olds who are going to become your employees. Those are the 5-year-olds who are going to become your customers. Those are the 5-year-olds who see the world completely different than you do. So I hope you guys think about what the future holds. Hope you guys think about innovation and iteration and how that impacts the world. And I hope you guys have great success. Thank you guys very much.